I used to believe family events were meant to celebrate bonds, laughter, and shared stories. I was wrong. At every gathering, I watched my husband and his mother glide through the room, perfectly polished, perfectly pleased with themselves. And me? I became a shadow, a presence that could be ignored without consequence. Conversations skipped over me, toasts excluded me, photos cropped me out, or if I was in them, it was at the edges, smiling in a way that didn't reach my eyes. It started subtly. Invitations would accidentally get lost. Seating arrangements left me at corners where no one could hear or see me. My husband, who once held my hand with pride, now squeezed someone else's, letting her presence dominate our shared life. And his mother, always the puppeteer, made sure every eye in the room followed her and her chosen heir, the real daughter-in-law, as she called her, with a smile that oozed superiority. I remember one wedding anniversary clearly. I had spent hours preparing, choosing the perfect dress, rehearsing jokes, and small compliments to slip into conversation. By the time I arrived, the living room buzzed with attention for them. My husband was telling a story that made everyone laugh. His mother nodded and added comments that made me feel even smaller. Not one glance for me. I forced a smile, nodded, and ate my dinner silently. I was there physically, but emotionally erased. At first, I thought it was me, my insecurity, my own paranoia. Maybe I imagined the way their shoulders brushed in perfect alignment, the way they whispered to each other while I poured the wine. Maybe I had lost my place in my own life. But soon, the pattern was undeniable. Invitations stopped arriving altogether. Photos on social media, taken from behind the scenes, revealed the truth. They attended events as a pair, leaving me absent or replaced by someone more compliant, more beautiful, more visible. And when my absence was questioned, my husband's mother smiled and said, "Oh, she couldn't make it." We missed her, of course. I sat through it all quietly. I let them believe I was powerless. But being invisible gave me something they would never expect. Time. Time to watch. Time to learn. Time to plan. Because shadows are not just forgotten, they observe. They note patterns, habits, and weaknesses. And when the right moment comes, shadows can strike in ways that no one sees coming. I didn't speak that night. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger yet. I only felt clarity. They thought I was absent. They thought I was weak. They didn't know I was only preparing. The more I watched them, the more I understood their arrogance. Every gesture, every smile, every whispered compliment to the other one was a lesson in their blind entitlement. They believed the world revolved around them, that influence and respect were theirs by birthright, not earned. And they believed, most of all, that I had nothing they would ever want. I started quietly collecting information. Every detail about their finances, their habits, their legal entanglements. I wasn't reckless. I didn't leave footprints that could be traced back to me. I observed, memorized, and documented. Their complacency was their weakness they never suspected. I was taking mental notes while they assumed I was too passive to act. One afternoon, while my husband was distracted with work, I found a document that made my pulse quicken. His mother's name was listed alongside his in a series of old wills and attorney records. It wasn't current, but it was enough. Enough to understand how much influence they wielded in family decisions, how far their control reached, and importantly, how it could be redirected. I started mapping it all out. Who handled the legal filings? Which attorneys were loyal to them? Which events required their presence for validation? I realized that every family gathering they used to dominate could become a stage for me. Every legal maneuver they had orchestrated to keep themselves central was a thread I could pull in the opposite direction. At night, I worked quietly in my study. Files were organized, copies were made, dates were noted. Subtle mistakes they had made over the years, missed signatures, overlooked clauses, ambiguous wording, were no longer invisible to me. They were ammunition. I didn't confront them. I didn't send warnings. I didn't threaten. I continued to attend gatherings, smile politely, and remain the invisible observer. They never suspected the storm building silently beneath my composed exterior. Every laugh they shared at my expense, every dismissive glance, fueled the precision of my plan. By the time I had completed the preparations, I didn't even need to speak to my husband. He was already detached from the truth, invested in his mother's approval. He assumed I was harmless, predictable, and entirely inconsequential. That misconception was my greatest advantage. I knew the exact moments the attorney would read wills, the timing of their announcements, and the order of precedence in family affairs. I knew which legal loopholes could be leveraged to replace them in influence without a single shout, without a single confrontation. It wasn't about revenge in the loud sense. It was about reclaiming space, respect, and control that had been systematically stripped from me for years. And I intended to do it with a quiet precision that would leave them shocked, exposed, and powerless. By the time the day came, I was ready, not angry, not desperate, calm, methodical, prepared to step into the only spotlight I had ever deserved. The attorney's office had always felt like neutral ground, quiet, formal, layered with the kind of seriousness that forced everyone to behave. But that morning, as I walked in, I felt something shift. Maybe it was the weight of what I carried with me, or maybe it was the stillness in the air. Whatever it was, it steadied me. My husband and his mother arrived late, as usual, with that shared confidence that made people step aside for them. He didn't even look at me. She gave me the kind of smile someone reserves for a child who doesn't understand the rules of the adult world. They sat together, whispering, already assuming the outcome of the day. The attorney, Mr. Halle, cleared his throat and began with the formalities. He was a man who stuck to protocol, detail-oriented, unbothered by emotion. Exactly the kind of mind I'd anticipated when I built my plan. As he read the first set of documents, my husband's posture relaxed. It was predictable. He assumed he was still the favored son, that his mother's influence guaranteed his position in every legal matter. She sat poised, chin slightly lifted, fingers folded together as if she were the silent architect of everyone's future. What they didn't know was that months ago, long before they even realized I was paying attention, I had already identified the overlooked clauses that allowed updates and revisions through secondary executors. Clauses they had carelessly ignored because they trusted the family name more than the written word. Mr. Hall paused, adjusted his glasses, and reached for the updated file, the one they still believed reflected their control. I watched his expression shift the moment he opened it. 10 seconds. That's how long it took before a subtle confusion crossed his face. He looked up at me first. Not them, me. My husband finally turned, irritation flickering in his eyes as he realized something wasn't aligning with his expectations. His mother stiffened, her composure cracking by degrees. Mr. Hall continued reading, and with every sentence, the room tightened. Their names weren't appearing where they expected. Their roles, once central, were now secondary. The decisions they once commanded were reassigned. The rights they thought they controlled had been replaced by me. The silence was almost physical. My husband leaned back, stunned, as if he couldn't process how the structure he relied on had shifted beneath him. His mother's face went pale, her breath caught between disbelief and offense. The air around them changed, heavy, sharp, unfamiliar. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I let the documents speak. Everything was done within the legal boundaries they had neglected for years. Everything signed, verified, dated, sealed. When the readings ended, neither of them spoke. My husband looked at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time: fear of the unknown. His mother looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, realizing I had never been the silent, harmless shadow she believed me to be. And for the first time, the room belonged to me. After the will readings, the world outside the attorney's office felt different, though nothing had changed except perception. My husband and his mother left in near silence, the kind of silence that carries shock, humiliation, and the weight of lost authority. They had assumed control was permanent, untouchable, They had underestimated me. In the following days, the consequences rippled through the family. Invitations that once favored them now went to me. Decisions they believed they dictated were deferred to my approval. Every call, every request, every inquiry that had once bounced off the walls of their ego now landed squarely on me. They tried to fight it. My husband, with his usual stubborn pride, sent letters questioning the legitimacy of the updates. His mother called contacts, leveraged friendships, and even attempted to pressure the attorney privately, but nothing worked. Each move they made was anticipated, countered, and neutralized with precision. I never had to raise my voice or step out of line. The law, combined with careful preparation, did it all. I noticed them at family events and at smaller gatherings. They once dominated. They hovered at the edges, whispers following them like shadows. Friends and relatives glanced at them, then at me. Some offered subtle smiles, congratulations, or nods of acknowledgement. For the first time, their reputation didn't shield them. Their influence had eroded in silence, like sand slipping through fingers. My husband tried one last attempt at charm. He approached me at a small dinner, pretending to be conciliatory, hinting at reconciliation and a return to old roles. I listened, nodded, and smiled. But my smile was calm, detached, not warmth, not encouragement. The power dynamic had shifted. The man who once dismissed me now realized he could no longer dictate my presence or my decisions. His mother's visits dwindled, and when she did arrive, she spoke less, her tone carefully measured, eyes constantly scanning for unseen weaknesses. She had learned, finally, that authority unearned is fragile. That day, I felt no triumph, only quiet satisfaction. They had overplayed their hands, and I had restored balance, not with anger or chaos, but with patience and strategy. The house, once filled with whispered schemes and subtle exclusions, now carried a different energy. My decisions, my voice, and my presence shaped gatherings and family interactions. There was no gloating, no loud confrontation. Just control, restored, firm, and undeniable. And I realized something vital. The measure of power is not in domination. It is in preparation, in foresight, in understanding weaknesses and using them with precision. My husband and his mother had forgotten that while they focused on their immediate satisfaction, someone else was quietly learning, quietly waiting, preparing. Their downfall was complete, not spectacular, not chaotic, but thorough. And in that quiet dominance, I found something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Weeks passed, and the shift in family dynamics became undeniable. Invitations, requests, and decisions now came to me first. My husband's mother, once the orchestrator of every gathering, now lingered at the edges, her influence reduced to whispers that carried no weight. My husband's attempts at persuasion had faltered, leaving him silent, cautious, unsure. They had both assumed I was powerless, invisible, but I had rewritten the rules without them noticing until it was too late. I didn't need to flaunt my victory. There was no need to announce it, no need for dramatic confrontations. The documents, the legal rights, and the careful planning spoke for themselves. Every event I attended, every decision made, was a reminder of what had shifted. Control, respect, and authority were no longer their dominion. They realized too late that underestimating me had been their greatest mistake. The peace that followed was different from what I expected. It wasn't loud or celebratory. It was calm, measured, and profoundly satisfying. My home, my gatherings, my voice all mattered in ways they never had. And in their silence, in their forced humility, I felt an inner freedom I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I could attend events and speak without fear of being ignored, erased, or dismissed. I could smile without restraint, make decisions without approval, and navigate family interactions with confidence. My husband tried to reclaim influence, subtly at first, then with small, calculated gestures, but they fell flat. Every attempt reminded him of how deeply his mother's arrogance had blinded them both. And every time, I responded not with anger, but with quiet assurance. My calm presence became a barrier no one could penetrate. They had played their roles for years, but I had stepped into mine, and it was stronger, steadier, and entirely my own. By the time the next major family event arrived, the atmosphere was transformed. Conversations started with me, decisions were deferred to me, and my husband's mother watched from the sidelines, her expression a mix of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement. I felt no triumph in her discomfort, only a quiet sense that justice had been served. The authority they had wielded, once absolute in their minds, had been rightfully restored to its proper place, to the person who had always observed, learned, and waited. And in that restoration, I found something even more precious than victory. I found peace. I found autonomy. I found the realization that true power is not forced, not shouted, not claimed through fear. It is cultivated through patience, strategy, and foresight. They had replaced me in the eyes of the family, in the spaces I had once occupied, but I had replaced them where it mattered most, in influence, in decision-making, and in the legacy of respect. For the first time, I was untouchable, unshaken, unthreatened. The shadow I had once been had grown into light. And finally, I belonged not as an afterthought, not as a shadow, but as the undeniable presence I had always been meant to be.